Nurse Morgan had one hand on the shaking patient and the other on the old olive jacket slipping from her shoulder when the Transportation Security Administration agent shoved her backward in the emergency room corridor. The wheels of the stretcher squealed. A monitor cried behind her. Visitors froze with coffee cups in their hands, and every nurse at the desk turned just in time to see her hit the wall, catch herself, and say nothing. Agent Victor Harlan pointed at her faded jacket like it was a crime. "You do not cross a federal line wearing stolen military property," he snapped. Nurse Morgan looked past him, not at the crowd, not at the humiliation, but at the sealed gray case beside the stretcher. On its handle was a helmet tag no one had read yet, and under the tag was a name she had spent 12 years trying to bury. Before this story unfolds, tell us in the comments what country you are watching from. If you believe quiet people can carry the heaviest secrets, subscribe to Hidden Patch Stories, where one forgotten object can open a truth the whole room was never ready to face. The emergency corridor at Harborline Medical Center had never felt so narrow. It was built wide enough for 2 stretchers, a crash cart, and a line of running nurses. But that afternoon, it was split in half by yellow federal tape, rolling security barriers, and men in dark uniforms who looked more comfortable blocking doors than saving lives. The airport was only 6 miles away. A charter flight carrying military contractors, federal witnesses, and medical cargo had made an emergency landing after a cabin pressure failure. Most passengers were shaken but stable. 3 were being treated for panic and dehydration. One man had collapsed during transport and arrived at Harborline barely conscious, strapped under a silver thermal blanket, his lips moving around words no one understood. Nurse Morgan understood the rhythm of his fear before she understood the words. She had been in the medicine supply room when the call came in. She came out tying her hair back, old jacket over her scrubs because the receiving bay doors were open and cold air was spilling into the hospital. The jacket looked wrong on her to people who did not know her. It was faded at the elbows, patched at the inside seam, and too heavy for an emergency room nurse. Most of the younger staff thought it was from a thrift store. A few had teased her for wearing something so ugly over clean blue scrubs, but Morgan wore it only when the cold reached her bones. Dr. Caleb Reyes was already beside the stretcher when she arrived. He was 38, calm under pressure, and proud of being the kind of physician who rarely raised his voice. That changed when he saw the patient's airway tighten. "Get respiratory," he called. "Morgan with me." She moved instantly. Agent Harlan stepped between her and the stretcher. "Back up," he said. Morgan looked at the patient, not at him. "He is decompensating. He is under federal transport. He is under my hospital's care. You are not cleared to touch the evidence." "I am not touching evidence," she said. "I am trying to keep him breathing." The man on the stretcher twisted weakly. His hand came out from under the blanket and grabbed the strap of a gray hard case rolling beside him. It was the size of a helmet carrier, scuffed at the corners and locked with a red plastic seal. His fingers would not let go. Harlan slapped his hand away. Morgan's eyes changed. It was a small change, almost invisible, but Dr. Rice saw it. Her shoulders still, her jaw tightened once. She took one step forward. "Do not strike a patient's hand," she said. The corridor went quiet enough for the fluorescent lights to hum. Harlan turned toward her slowly. He was broad, square-faced, and wearing his authority like armor. His blue Transportation Security Administration badge was clipped high on his chest, where everyone could see it. He looked at Morgan's old jacket, then at her hospital badge, then at the faded cuff hanging over her wrists. "You nurses think the emergency room cancels federal rules," he said. "It does not." Morgan leaned around him. "Dr. Reyes, he needs oxygen now." I said, "Back up. He is asking for the case." "That case is restricted." He is asking because something inside matters to his medical history. Harlan laughed once, sharp and public. Medical history? You think a helmet is a chart? The word helmet moved through Morgan like a hand pressing against an old bruise. She looked at the gray case again. Dr. Reyes reached for the oxygen mask. Another agent shifted to block him, less aggressively than Harlan, but still in the way. Harlan lifted the tape, creating a boundary across the corridor floor. No one crosses unless I clear them. Morgan crossed. She did not rush him. She did not shove him. She simply stepped under the tape with the oxygen mask in her hand, because the patient's chest was pulling too hard, and the seconds were narrowing. Harlan's palm hit her shoulder. The shove was not brutal, but it was meant to humiliate. It was hard enough to send her backward into the wall beside the nurse's station. Her shoulder struck a mounted glove dispenser. The box cracked loose, spilling blue gloves across the floor like torn petals. Everyone watched. The receptionist gasped. A young intern stopped with both hands over his mouth. Dr. Reyes froze with the oxygen line in his grip. Even the patient seemed to hear the sound of Morgan's back hitting the wall, because his eyes opened for 1 second, glassy and terrified. Morgan did not cry out. She bent, picked up the oxygen mask, and stood straight again. Harlan pointed to the old jacket. "Take that off," he said. "Now." Morgan breathed once through her nose. "This is not about my jacket. It is. When you wear fake military gear into a restricted federal intake, it is a jacket. It has a patch under the sleeve." The crowd leaned closer without moving. Morgan's left hand went to her cuff. Dr. Reyes saw the gesture. It was not the gesture of a liar hiding a costume. It was the gesture of a woman protecting a woman. "Agent Harlan," Dr. Reyes said. "She is one of my best nurses. She is interfering with federal custody. She is trying to treat a patient." Harlan turned his head without lowering his finger. "Doctor, I do not care how many beds you run. This hallway is a controlled transfer site until my team clears the passengers and property." The patient's hand trembled toward the case again. His mouth moved. Morgan heard it. It was not a word at first. It was a broken sound shaped by pain, panic, and memory. "Ma," he whispered. Harlan looked down. "What?" The patient swallowed. His eyes searched the corridor, passing over uniforms, badges, white coats, and frightened faces until they landed on the woman in the old jacket. "Morgan," he breathed. No one moved. Harlan frowned. "You know him?" Morgan's face remained controlled, but the color had left it. "I need to assess him," she said. "That is not an answer." The patient's fingers scraped weakly at the helmet case. The red seal spun, and the handle turned just enough for the paper tag to face upward. Dr. Reyes looked down first. The tag was creased, stained, and old. It had been placed inside a clear plastic sleeve, the kind used to preserve chain of custody evidence. The printed line across it read, "Recovered field helmet, unidentified medical extraction unit." Under that, in faded black marker, was one word, Morgan. Agent Harlan saw it too. His expression changed from anger to suspicion, and suspicion made him louder. "I saw you stage this," he said. Morgan looked at him as if he had slapped the patient instead of shoving her. "No, you wore the jacket. You crossed the tape. Now the evidence just happens to have your name on it." The crowd shifted. Some faces doubted her. Some pitied her. Some were already deciding the story before it finished. Morgan took one step closer to the stretcher. Harlan blocked her again. The patient's oxygen dipped. The monitor gave a thin warning sound. Dr. Reyes snapped out of the shock. "I am treating him." He pushed around Harlan, but the agent grabbed his arm. Morgan's voice cut through the corridor, quiet and exact. "His airway will close in less than a minute." Dr. Reyes looked at her. "How do you know?" Morgan's eyes did not leave the patient. Because he is not panicking from fear, she said. He is reacting to the sealant fumes from the case lining. The red tape is wrong. It is the old kind. It should not be near a patient with field exposure sensitivity. Harlan stared at her. Field exposure. Morgan went still, as if she had said more than she meant to. The patient made a weak choking sound. This time, Dr. Rice did not wait. He tore the oxygen mask from Morgan's hand, placed it over the patient's face, and ordered everyone back. The second agent hesitated, then obeyed. Harlan did not. Morgan reached around him and unclipped the red seal from the case handle. Harlan grabbed her wrists. "You are done," he said. A new voice came from the ambulance bay doors. "Who touched that case?" Everyone turned. Colonel Adrian Voss walked in, wearing a dress uniform beneath a dark overcoat, his medals catching the hospital lights like small pieces of ice. He was tall, silver-haired, and carried the kind of authority that made people move before he asked. Two military aides followed him, but he barely seemed to notice them. Harlan released Morgan's wrist and straightened. "Colonel Voss," he said, "this nurse interfered with restricted federal evidence." Voss looked at Morgan. His eyes moved over her face without recognition. Then they dropped to the old jacket. Disapproval sharpened his mouth. "Why is a civilian nurse wearing that?" he asked. The words landed harder than Harlan's shove. Morgan held his gaze. For half a second, something flickered behind her eyes. Not fear, not guilt, recognition. Then it vanished. Dr. Reyes looked between them. "Colonel, with respect, we have an unstable patient." Voss ignored him. "Nurse, remove the jacket." Morgan said nothing. Harlan stepped closer, satisfied now that someone higher had taken his side. The corridor watched again. Morgan slowly took off the old olive jacket. The left sleeve caught on her watch, turning inside out. A hidden patch, faded and half-sewn beneath the lining, flashed under the hospital lights. It was not decorative. It was not a thrift store patch. It was a black circle with a lantern stitched in dull gold thread, crossed by a white medical staff and a winged blade. Around the edge, the lettering had nearly worn away, but one line remained clear. "Nightingale 7. Colonel Voss went pale for one breath. Then he hardened his face. "Confiscate it," he said. Morgan pulled the jacket against her chest. "No," she said. Harlan reached for it. Dr. Rice stepped between them, and from the stretcher, beneath the oxygen mask, the patient whispered again. "Do not let them erase her twice." The words were too soft for the whole corridor, but Morgan heard them. So did Colonel Voss. His eyes snapped to the patient. For the first time since entering Harbor Line Medical Center, the colonel looked afraid. The patient's name was Elias Vale, according to the temporary hospital bracelet printed from his transport manifest. He was listed as a federal contractor, age 46, traveling under medical observation from the West Coast to Washington. His file contained allergies, medication notes, and one warning in capital letters: "Do not separate patient from recovered property during transfer." No one had explained why. Once Dr. Reyes stabilized his breathing, Elias was moved into Trauma Room 3, which the hospital used for high-risk federal cases when privacy mattered. Agent Harlan insisted on standing inside the door. Colonel Voss insisted on placing two military aides outside it. Nurse Morgan insisted on washing her hands and checking Elias' vitals, as if the entire corridor had not just watched her be shoved into a wall. That bothered Dr. Reyes more than the shove itself. He had worked with Morgan for 3 years. She was not cold. He had seen her sit with frightened patients after midnight, seen her learn the names of children's stuffed animals, seen her whisper comfort to elderly veterans who woke from anesthesia, thinking they were somewhere else. She had a gentleness that never asked to be noticed, But after Harlan shoved her, she had not comforted herself. She had folded the moment away like a letter she did not plan to send. Dr. Rice watched her adjust the oxygen flow. "Your shoulder," he said quietly. "I am fine." "You hit the dispenser hard." I said, I. He lowered his voice. "Morgan, who is he?" She looked at L. I asked. Patient, that is not what I asked." "It is what matters." Harlan snorted from the door. Convenient answer. Morgan did not look at him. Colonel Voss stood near the sealed helmet case, arms crossed. The case now sat on a stainless steel table. Its red seal had been cut away because Morgan said the fumes were affecting LES. The helmet inside remained covered by gray protective cloth. Voss had not allowed anyone to open it. He also had not taken his eyes off the hidden patch on Morgan's jacket, now folded on a chair beside the supply cabinet. Harlan noticed. "That patch means something, Colonel." Voss took too long to answer. "It is an old unauthorized insignia." Morgan's fingers paused on the blood pressure cuff. Dr. Reyes saw it. "Unauthorized," Harlan repeated. "Some units make symbols for themselves," Voss said. "It does not make them official." Morgan finished recording the blood pressure. "His pressure is improving." Voss turned on her. "I asked you to remove yourself from the case. You asked me to remove the jacket. Do not play word games with me." She met his eyes. "I am not playing." The tension in the room rose again. Elias stirred, agitated by the voices. Dr. Reyes stepped in. "Everyone lower your volume." Voss's attention stayed on Morgan. "You have no clearance here." "She has hospital clearance," Dr. Reyes said. "This is not just a hospital matter." "Then explain what it is." Voss looked at the doctor as if he had forgotten civilians could ask questions. "A federal chain of custody transfer, connected to a Department of Defense review." Morgan's face changed at the phrase, "Department of Defense review." It was subtle, but Dr. Reyes was looking for it now. Harlan folded his arms. "The review started because someone at the airport flagged the case. Passenger refused to release it. Said it had to stay with him until he found a woman named Morgan. Then she walks in wearing a jacket with a matching patch. That is not a coincidence." Morgan checked Elias's pulse. "No, it is not." The room went still. Harlan leaned forward. "So you admit it?" "I admit coincidences are sometimes just wreckers trying to come home." Voss's voice turned cold. "Careful." Morgan finally looked at him. That one word, careful, seemed to travel between them from another time. Reyes felt it then. The room was not witnessing a misunderstanding. It was witnessing an old history forcing itself through a locked door. Elias opened his eyes. He looked at Morgan with the desperate focus of a man trying to confirm that memory had not betrayed him. "Lantern," he whispered. Morgan's hand tightened around the bed rail. Voss stepped closer. "Minister Vale, do not speak." Elias swallowed. She came back. "You are sedated," Voss said. "No." Elias' voice cracked. "I watched them mark her dead." Morgan closed her eyes for half a second. Dr. Reyes turned to her. "Mark? Who dead?" "No one," Voss said quickly. Morgan opened her eyes. "Doctor, he needs rest." Harlan laughed under his breath. "Rest? He is making allegations. He is confused. Or he is telling the truth." Morgan looked at Harlan then, and the pain in her face was so naked for one moment that his smirk faded. She said, "You do not want every truth spoken in a room full of strangers." Harlan recovered quickly. "I want the truth about why a nurse in a fake jacket touched restricted property." Dr. Reyes looked at the folded jacket. "Let us start with that." "Morgan, may I see the patch?" "No," the answer came too fast. He softened his voice. "I'm not trying to hurt you." She stared at the jacket. That is what everyone says before they ask for proof from a wound. Elias's breathing hitched. Colonel Voss moved to the table and placed his hand on the helmet case. "This case goes with me," he said. Morgan turned sharply. "No, you do not give orders here. As you remove that helmet before Elias is stable, you will trigger him." Harlan rolled his eyes. "Trigger him how?" With nostalgia, Morgan's voice dropped. With the last sound he heard before a roof came down, the room went silent. Dr. Reyes looked at Elias. The patient's fingers had curled into the sheet. His pulse had jumped. Voss noticed too, and something like shame passed through his expression before pride buried it. Again, Dr. Reyes said carefully, "How do you know that?" Morgan did not answer. Harlan seized the silence. "Because she has been tracking the case. Because she knew it was coming. Because maybe she is part of whatever someone tried to smuggle through the airport." Morgan gave a tired, almost sad breath. "You shoved me in front of an entire emergency department because you thought an old nurse's jacket was a smuggling plan. You are not old," Harlan snapped. "And you are not military." The sentence was supposed to insult her. It made Colonel Voss look away. Dr. Reyes saw that too. A nurse from the desk knocked lightly on the trauma room window. Her name was Lila Chen, and she was usually fearless. Now she looked unsettled. Dr. Reyes stepped out. Lila handed him Morgan's employee file print too. "You asked me to check the database." He glanced at the page. "Han, her hospital records are normal. Nursing license, emergency certifications, trauma course, federal disaster response course. That is... there is something else. Her background check has a gap." "What kind of gap?" "Before she came here, there is a 12-year period listed as civilian humanitarian contract work. But the verification link goes nowhere. I tried the federal employment cross-check. It returned one line." Dr. Reyes looked down. The printed line at the bottom read, "Record sealed by higher authority. Do not request electronically." He looked through the glass at Morgan. She was smoothing the blanket over Elias with the same steady tenderness she showed every patient. Behind her, Colonel Voss watched like a man standing in front of a locked room he had hoped would never open. Reyes returned inside with the file hidden under his chart. "Agent Harlan," he said. Outside, Harlan blinked. "Excuse me. This is a treatment room. You can observe through the glass. I am not leaving evidence unattended. The evidence is not my patient." "He is." Harlan looked to Voss. The colonel nodded once reluctantly. Harlan stepped out, but not before pointing at Morgan again. "This is not over." Morgan did not react. When the door closed, Elias relaxed by a fraction. Dr. Reyes moved beside Morgan. "Your background check has a sealed line." Her eyes remained on the monitor. "Many people have complicated employment histories. Not like this." She took the chart from him and placed it face down. "Caleb," she said quietly, using his first name for the first time in months. "Please, do not pull on a thread just because it is visible." He stared at her. "What happens if I do?" She looked at the covered helmet case. "People who survive by forgetting will remember," she said. "And people who built their lives on forgetting will decide I am the threat." Before he could answer, Colonel Voss lifted the gray cloth from the case. Morgan turned. "Do not," she said. Voss opened it anyway. Inside lay a battered flight helmet, matte black, its visor cracked but intact on the side. Beneath scratches and dust, a small lantern had been painted by hand in fading gold, the same lantern as the patch. Taped inside the rim was a strip of medical cloth with darkened handwriting. Not a name this time, a message. "If found, open her file." Dr. Reyes read it aloud before he could stop himself. Colonel Voss shut the case so hard, Elias flinched. Morgan reached for the patient, but her own hand was shaking. Outside the glass, Agent Harlan had seen enough to smile. He pulled out his phone and called the federal duty desk. What he did not know was that the moment he reported the words on the helmet, the request did not go to the airport. It went to the Pentagon. And somewhere in a quiet records room beneath layers of old silence, Nurse Morgan's name lit up on a screen for the first time in 12 years. Captain Naomi Pierce had been on duty at the Pentagon for 6 hours when the restricted alert crossed her screen. Most alerts were boring. A misfiled transport code, an expired badge number, a contractor trying to access a form he had no reason to open. This one made her sit up. Recovered field helmet, lantern, insignia, handwritten instruction. Morgan. The system asked for secondary confirmation. Naomi entered her code. The screen paused and displayed a warning she had only seen twice in her career. Dormant casualty file. Linked to living civilian identifier. She read it again. Living civilian identifier. Then she opened the hospital feed attached to the federal transfer report. The corridor camera had captured everything. The tape across the emergency room hallway. Agent Harlan's hand on Nurse Morgan's shoulder. The shove. Her back hitting the wall. The old jacket falling open. The patch showing for one clean second beneath the sleeve. Naomi leaned closer. The patch was faded, but the lantern was unmistakable. Her breath caught. It is real. At Harbor Line, no one knew the Pentagon had begun watching. They only knew the hospital had changed temperature. News of the show had spread from the emergency room to imaging, from imaging to the surgical floor, from the surgical floor to security. Some staff believed Morgan had been mistreated. Others whispered that federal officers did not shove nurses unless something was wrong. The most painful whispers were not the cruel ones. They were the uncertain ones. She had saved half that hospital from mistakes over the years. She had covered double shifts, trained new nurses, remembered allergies no computer flagged, and sat with families who had no one else. But one public accusation, one uniformed man pointing at her jacket, and suddenly people looked at her as if they were waiting for her to explain why she had disappointed them. Morgan felt every look. She kept working. Elias had been moved from Trauma Room 3 to a monitored bay with a privacy curtain. The helmet case sat locked in the corner under guard. Colonel Voss had made 3 calls and grown more rigid after each one. Agent Harlan had filed an incident report accusing Morgan of obstruction, unauthorized handling of federal property, and potential impersonation of military service. He seemed proud of the last phrase, potential impersonation. Morgan signed a medication check and handed it to Lila. Lila did not take it right away. "I saw what happened," Lila whispered. Morgan gave her a small nod. "Then you saw a patient nearly lose oxygen because everyone was arguing. I saw him shove you. Let it go. I do not want to let it go." Morgan's eyes softened. "That is because you are kind." "No," Lila said. "It is because you always tell us not to let people bully patients. I think that should include you." Morgan looked away. Kindness was harder to stand under than cruelty. Cruelty could be braced against. Kindness slipped through armor. Before she could answer, Agent Harlan approached with 2 hospital security officers and a printed form. "Nurse Morgan," he said loudly enough for nearby staff to hear, "you are being removed from this federal intake area pending investigation." The nurse's station went silent again. Dr. Rise stepped out from the charting alcove. "On whose authority?" Harlan lifted the form. "Federal incident escalation. That is not a clinical removal order." Colonel Voss appeared behind him. "It is now supported by my request." Dr. Ray's turned. "Colonel, she is assigned to this patient. She is emotionally compromised." Morgan's mouth tightened. Dr. Ray's said, "You have no basis for that." Voss pointed to the helmet case. "That is my basis." Harlan stepped closer to Morgan. "Badge?" She looked at him. Your hospital badge, he said. Hand it over until administration reviews your access. A crowd gathered before anyone admitted it was a crowd. A janitor stopped with his mop bucket. A respiratory therapist froze near the supply cart. 2 interns stood shoulder to shoulder, pretending to read a chart. Morgan unclipped her badge. Dr. Reyes said, "Morgan, do not." She held the badge in her palm, then closed her fingers around it. "I will not leave, Elias," she said. Harlan smiled, because he had been waiting for defiance. "Then you are refusing a lawful order." Morgan's voice stayed even. "I am refusing to abandon a patient connected to a trauma response. I understand better than anyone in this room." Voss's face tightened. "You understand nothing." She looked at him then. Not at his medals, not at his rank, at him. "Are you sure?" The question struck Voss with visible force. For a moment, he was not a colonel in a polished corridor. He was a younger man somewhere dark, listening to metal creak and people call for help. Then Harlan ruined it. "Enough drama," he said. "You are a nurse with a fake patch and a patient feeding your fantasy. Badge now." Morgan opened her hand. The badge lay there, clipped to a faded lanyard. Tucked behind the plastic sleeve was a small photograph no one had noticed before. It showed a much younger Morgan standing beside a field hospital tent, her hair shorter, her face thinner, her smile almost shy. Next to her stood a line of people in dusty uniforms, but the photo had been cut so most of their faces were missing. At the bottom edge, almost trimmed away, was the corner of the lantern symbol. Harlan snatched the badge. The photograph slipped free and fluttered to the floor. Lila bent to pick it up. Voss saw it first. "Give me that," he said. Lila hesitated. Morgan closed her eyes. "Lila." The young nurse handed the photograph to Voss. He stared at it. His face drained again. Worse this time. Dr. Reyes stepped closer. "Colonel." Voss looked at Morgan. "Where did you get this?" She gave a faint, humorless smile. "I was there when it was taken." No, yes, no," he said again. But this time it was not command. It was refusal. "You were not." Morgan's voice softened. "Adrian." The use of his first name shattered the air. Harlan looked between them. "You know each other?" Voss folded the photograph and shoved it into his coat pocket. "We do not." Morgan absorbed that without blinking. But Dr. Reyes saw the wound land. Elias' monitor beeped faster behind the curtain. Morgan turned at once. "He hears you." Harlan blocked her. "You are no longer a sign." Morgan's patience finally cracked, not into anger, but into something quieter and more dangerous. "Moo." The single word carried such command that even Harlan stepped back half an inch before catching himself. Voss heard it too. He stared at her as if a voice had returned from a grave. Morgan pushed past and went to Elias. His eyes were open, fixed on the ceiling. His fingers clawed at the blanket. "They are closing the door," he whispered. "No one is closing the door," Morgan said. Lantern went back. "I am here." "You went back through the smoke." "I am here," Harlan muttered. "This is ridiculous." Elias turned his head toward him with sudden clarity. "She carried your kind out when men with bigger badges ran." The corridor fell silent. Harlan's face flushed. "What did he say?" Morgan adjusted the blanket. "He is disoriented." "No," Elias said. "I was young. I was trapped. I saw her helmet. I saw the patch. Then the report said she never existed." Voss stepped back. Dr. Reyes looked at Morgan. "Morgan." She shook her head once, a plea and a warning. Then every phone at the nurse's station rang at the same time. Lila answered the first, her eyes widened. She covered the receiver and looked toward Dr. Reyes. "It is the hospital director," she said. "He says the Pentagon is on the line." Agent Harlan laughed, but it sounded thinner now. "Good. They can confirm she is lying." Colonel Voss did not laugh. He looked at the helmet case, then at Morgan, then at the old jacket draped over the chair. For the first time, he looked like a man who had spent 12 years praying a file would stay closed and had just heard the lock turn. The hospital director, Malcolm Greer, came down personally because people with polished shoes always arrive when fear found a camera. He was a narrow man with a careful voice, the kind who spoke in soft tones that could still end careers. He entered the emergency corridor with a tablet in hand and two administrators behind him. He did not look at Morgan first. He looked at the crowd. That told her everything. Everyone returned to work. Greer said. No one moved quickly enough. He tried again. This is a hospital, not a theater. The crowd dispersed in fragments, but curiosity stayed behind in every glance. Greer turned to Morgan. Nurse Morgan, I need you in the consultation room. Dr. Reyes stepped beside her. For what purpose? Greer's polite expression tightened. Doctor, please do not make this more difficult. Harlan crossed his arms. She is under federal review. She is hospital staff. Dr. Reyes. Voss remained silent. That silence frightened Morgan more than Harlan's anger. She knew men like Harlan. They confused control for courage. They shouted because quiet made them feel small. But Colonel Adrian Voss had once been different, or she had believed he was. He had been young, terrified, and brilliant in the field, a man carrying too much responsibility in a place where maps became lies after sunset. She had saved him once. Then she had let the world believe he had saved himself. Greer gestured toward the consultation room. Now, please. Morgan looked at Elias through the glass. His breathing had steadied, but his fingers still rested near the edge of the blanket, reaching toward the helmet case. I will go when another nurse is assigned who understands his trigger response. Lila stepped forward. I can stay. Morgan studied her. No one opens the case near him. No red seal adhesive. Keep the lights low if he wakes confused. If he asks for a lantern, tell him she is not leaving. Lila nodded, eyes shining. I will. Harlan scoffed. Lantern again. Morgan walked past him without looking. The consultation room had glass walls with privacy blinds. Greer lowered them halfway, which gave the illusion of privacy without the protection of it. Dr. Reyes came in behind Morgan. Alan came too. Voss entered last and closed the door. Greer placed the tablet on the table. The Pentagon Duty Office has requested clarification regarding a restricted file linked to Nurse Morgan's identity. Harlan leaned forward. Excellent. Ask them why she is wearing an unauthorized patch. Greer ignored him. They requested visual confirmation of the patch, the helmet, and Nurse Morgan. Morgan stood very still. Dr. Reyes looked at her. Yes, that bad? She almost smiled. That depends on how much of the truth survives. Voss spoke for the first time. There is no truth to recover. Morgan turned to him. Then, why are you shaking? He looked down. His right hand was trembling. He folded it into a fist. Greer tapped the tablet, and the screen lit with a secure call. A woman in a dark service uniform appeared, her face composed, her eyes alert. She looked younger than Voss, but carried a different kind of authority, one that came from knowledge instead of volume. This is Captain Naomi Pierce, Department of Defense Records Integrity Division, she said. I need everyone in the room to identify themselves. Greer did. Dr. Reyes did. Harlan announced his name and agency with force. Voss gave his name last. Naomi's eyes flicked with recognition. Colonel Voss, she said. You are present at Harborline? I am overseeing federal recovery property. Understood. Morgan said nothing. Naomi looked at her through the screen. Nurse Morgan. The room changed around those two words. Not Miss Morgan. Not staff member. Not suspect. Nurse Morgan. Morgan swallowed. Yes, I need your full legal name for confirmation. Elena Grace Morgan. Naomi typed. Of birth? Morgan gave it. Naomi typed again. The system must have answered because her face shifted, not dramatically, but with solemn certainty. "Thank you," she said quietly. Harlan leaned toward the tablet. "Captain, she obstructed my team and tampered with a restricted helmet case." Naomi did not look at him. "Agent Harlan, I have reviewed the corridor footage." He stiffened. She continued, "Your physical contact with Nurse Morgan is being referred separately." His jaw opened, then closed. Morgan looked away from the screen. She had not wanted that. Public justice still felt like public attention, and attention had always been dangerous. Naomi said, "Nurse Morgan, we received a scan request after a field helmet bearing the lantern insignia was reported at your facility." Voss interrupted. "Captain, that insignia is not official." Naomi looked at him. "That statement is inaccurate." The silence that followed was sharp. Voss's face darkened. "Those records were never validated. They were sealed," Naomi said. "That is not the same as invalid." Morgan's hand went to the back of a chair. Dr. Reyes noticed and moved slightly closer, not touching her, only making sure she would not have to stand alone if her knees weakened. Naomi continued, "A dormant casualty file connected to Operation Harbor. Lantern was opened automatically when the helmet instruction was entered." Greer blinked. "Casualty file," Morgan whispered. Her voice softened. "Nurse Morgan, I know this is difficult. The file contains conflicting entries. One lists you as missing and presumed deceased. Another, sealed beneath command review, links your identity to a protected civilian medical placement." Dr. Reyes stared at Morgan. "Missing and presumed deceased." The words filled the room with a grief no one had been invited to share. Harlan looked confused, then irritated by his own confusion. "That is impossible. She has worked here for years." Naomi turned to him. "Many protected placements are designed to look ordinary." Harlan's confidence broke at the edge. Greer sat down without meaning to. "Protected placement." Morgan closed her eyes. Voss placed both hands on the table. "Captain, you are discussing classified material in front of civilian personnel." Naomi's gaze hardened. "Colonel, this call was triggered because civilian personnel witnessed a federal agent assault a protected medical responder while a Department of Defense recovery item was mishandled. The file is already open." Voss flinched at the phrase. "The file is already open." Morgan opened her eyes. She looked not relieved, but tired, as if a door she had held shut for years had finally been kicked in from the other side. Naomi said, "I need the helmet shown to camera." Voss straightened. "Absolutely not." Naomi did not raise her voice. "Colonel Voss, refusal will be logged." He stared at the screen. For a moment, the room waited to see whether rank or record would win. Then Morgan spoke. "Shh." Voss' jaw tightened. "You do not understand what happens next." She looked at him with a sadness that seemed older than the hospital itself. "I have understood what happens next every morning since you signed the first report." The sentence struck him silent. Dr. Reyes looked at Voss. "What report?" Voss did not answer. Naomi did. "That is what we are determining." The helmet case was brought in by a military aide who had no idea he was carrying the center of a buried life. He placed it on the consultation table and unlocked it under Naomi's direction. The old helmet emerged slowly, like an artifact from a shipwreck. Under the room lights, the damage looked worse. Scratches crossed the visor. The side was dented. The lantern symbol had been painted by hand, then sealed under clear resin, now cracked with age. Naomi's voice changed when she saw it. "Rotate left." The aide did. "Stop." She leaned toward her camera. There, inside the helmet rim, beneath the cloth message, was a service number etched so lightly it was almost invisible. Naomi, read it out. Morgan's lips parted. Dr. Reyes heard her whisper the numbers with Naomi, perfectly in sync. Harlan stared. Voss sank into a chair. Naomi typed the number into the system. This time, the wait was longer. No one spoke. From outside the consultation room came the ordinary sounds of the emergency department trying to continue being ordinary. A phone ringing, wheels rolling, someone asking for blankets, a child crying in the distance. Life did not pause for secrets. It only made them more painful. The tablet chimed. Naomi read silently. Her face lost its professional distance. Nurse Morgan, she said. The helmet is authenticated. Morgan held the chair tighter. Naomi continued. The file confirms the helmet was assigned to Chief Flight Nurse Elena Grace Morgan, Joint Medical Extraction Cell. Call sign Lantern 7. Dr. Reyes exhaled as if he had been hit. Lila, watching from beyond the blinds, covered her mouth. Harlan stepped back. Greer looked at Morgan like he was seeing an entirely different person standing in the same scrub. Voss whispered, "No." Naomi looked at him. "Yes." Morgan's voice was barely audible. "How much?" Naomi understood the question. "How much of the file open?" Morgan asked. Naomi looked down. "Enough to confirm identity. Enough to confirm casualty error. Enough to confirm the command report was disputed." Voss stood abruptly. "Captain, stop." Morgan turned to him. Still, his face twisted. "You do not know what that report cost. I know exactly what it cost. You disappear. I was ordered to disappear. You let them think I led the extraction. I let them think you survived it clean." The words stunned the room. Dr. Reyes looked from Morgan to Voss. "What does that mean?" Morgan's eyes shone, but her voice stayed controlled. "It means the story everyone promoted was easier than the story that happened." Naomi said. "Nurse Morgan, do you authorize continued review of the disputed sections?" Voss stared at her. In his eyes was panic, pleading, and accusation all at once. Morgan looked at him. For years, she had imagined this moment as anger. She thought if the door ever opened, rage would walk through it first. But standing there in a hospital consultation room, wearing scrubs under fluorescent lights while a man she had saved trembled under the weight of his own preserved reputation, she felt no triumph, only sorrow. Because truth did not return the dead. Truth did not give back the years she had spent being no one. Truth only asked whether silence still served love, or whether it had become another kind of lie. She turned back to Naomi. "Yes," she said. "Open it." Naomi entered the authorization. The Pentagon file unfolded line by line, and with every line, the hospital room lost another illusion. Operation Harbor Lantern had not been a battle story in the way people expected. It had been a rescue mission during a collapsing humanitarian evacuation after a coastal medical station was cut off by fire, panic, and failing communications. The official report had once described it as a command-led extraction coordinated by then Captain Adrian Voss, assisted by unnamed medical personnel. But the recovered file told a different story. The maps had been wrong. The main route had been blocked. The evacuation helicopters had been waved away because someone believed the landing zone was compromised. Inside the damaged medical station were 23 patients, 3 civilian nurses, 4 injured service members, and a group of children separated from their convoy. Communications failed. Command hesitated. Then a medical extraction nurse with a lantern patch on her sleeve took a field radio, corrected the map by memory, and led survivors through a service tunnel no one believed existed. Her call sign was Lantern 7. Her name was Elena Morgan. She had not done it alone. The file was careful about that. It named radio operators, pilots, medics, and frightened young soldiers who carried stretchers while the ceiling groaned above them. But the disputed report made one thing brutally clear. When the station began to collapse, Captain Voss ordered the final withdrawal too early. Morgan disobeyed. She went back. Dr. Reyes read that line over Naomi's shoulder on the tablet reflection, and suddenly every quiet thing about Morgan rearranged in his mind. The way she never left a frightened patient alone. The way she always checked locked doors during drills. The way she hated being called a hero. The way she wore the old jacket only when the cold reached her bones. Agent Harlan had gone completely silent. Colonel Voss stood with his back to the blinds, face gray. Naomi's voice remained steady, but compassion ran beneath it. The original command report stated Nurse Morgan was missing during the collapse and presumed deceased. A later classified addendum stated she survived with severe exposure, refused public correction, and accepted protected civilian placement after threats connected to witness testimony. Greer whispered, "Threats?" Morgan looked at the floor. Naomi did not reveal more than she had to. The addendum further states that Nurse Morgan declined honors that would require reopening the command dispute. Harlan looked at Morgan, stunned. "You declined honors?" Morgan's eyes lifted to him. "You thought I wanted a patch for attention," she said softly. "I hid it so no one would ask why I was still breathing when others were not." Harlan had no answer. Dr. Reyes turned to Voss. "You took credit?" Voss's face tightened with pain and anger. "I was told the final report protected morale." "Whose morale?" Voss looked at Morgan. She looked back at him, and for the first time, she let the room see the grief. "You were 29, she said. "You had just lost half your unit. And you froze because the roof started coming down. I heard it in your voice. I knew if they blamed you publicly, you would spend your life inside that moment." Voss's lips trembled. "Do not S.O. I signed the addendum. I said I would not contest the summary." "You disappeared," he said again. But now it sounded like an old accusation he had repeated to survive himself. "I was placed where the threats could not follow. You never told me. You never looked for me after the promotion board cleared." The words were gentle. That made them worse. Voss sat down slowly. Outside, the corridor had gone quiet again. The blinds hid the room, but not completely. Shadows moved behind the glass. People knew something impossible was happening. Naomi continued. "The helmet was recovered last month from a SEAL storage site during a records audit. It appears Mr. Vale was listed as a witness because he was one of the rescued miners from the station. He requested transport with the recovered property to deliver it to the review board." Dr. Reyes looked toward Elias's room. "He was a child." Morgan nodded. 14. "He remembered you. He remembered the helmet," she said. "Children remember the shape of the person who carries them out." Harlan rubbed his face. His anger had nowhere to stand now. "But pride dies hard," he said, quieter than before. "I was following procedure." Morgan looked at him for a long moment. "No," she said. "You were protecting procedure from a patient. That is different." He looked down. Voss still stared at the table. "What happens to the file now?" Naomi answered. "The disputed record will be reviewed. Any false or incomplete attribution will be corrected. Nurse Morgan's protected status will be reassessed with her consent. The incident at this hospital will be included." Harlan swallowed. "Included how?" Naomi's gaze moved to him. "Accurately." That word struck the room with more force than any threat. Accurately. For 12 years, accuracy had been the missing mercy. Morgan touched the old jacket, which had been placed beside the helmet. Her fingers found the hidden patch under the sleeve. Voss watched her. "I thought you were dead," he whispered. Morgan shook her head. "No, you thought the version of me that complicated your survival was gone." He flinched. Dr. Reyes expected anger then. He expected Morgan to finally let it rise, but she only folded the jacket with careful hands. "Adrian," she said, "I did not keep silent because you deserve the lie. I kept silent because I was tired, and because every time they asked me to tell the story, I saw the faces of people who did not walk out." Her voice thinned. "I thought silence was mercy." Voss covered his mouth with one hand. Morgan looked toward Elias. "But mercy without truth turns into another locked room," she said. "And I cannot ask that man to keep standing guard outside it for me." Noami's expression softened. "Nurse Morgan, there is one more item." Morgan looked back at the screen. "The file contains an unprocessed personal statement attached to the helmet recovery. It was recorded by Mr. Vale before transport. Do you consent to hear it?" Morgan closed her eyes. For a second, she was not sure she could survive one more voice from the past. Dr. Reyes said quietly, "You do not have to." She appreciated him for that. For not pushing, for not needing the story more than he cared about the person. But Elias had carried a helmet across the country with failing lungs and an old memory. She owed him the dignity of listening. "I," she said. Naomi played the recording. Elias's voice filled the consultation room, weaker than in life but clear. "My name is Elias Vale. I was 14 when the harbor lantern station collapsed. Report said a captain let us out. That is not what I remember. I remember a nurse with a lantern on her sleeve. I remember she gave me her helmet because I was scared of falling debris. I remember her telling me to count her steps and not look back. I remember men shouting that the route was gone, and she said, 'Then we make one.' I remember she went back after me. I remember waiting for her outside and seeing her come out carrying a woman twice her size. Then the report said she was dead. Later it said she had never been assigned. I kept quiet because I was a kid and adults told me memory changes under stress. But memory did not change. Adults changed the paper." Morgan pressed her hand to her mouth. The recording continued. "If this helmet reaches anyone who still cares about truth, open her file. Her name was Morgan. Lantern 7. She came back when everyone else said there was no time. I do not want medals for her. I want her to stop being erased." The recording ended. No one spoke. Then, from outside the blinds, someone began to clap. It was not loud at first. One pair of hands, lie, then another. A respiratory therapist, then a security guard. Then the sound moved down the corridor in uneven, emotional waves. Morgan flinched as if applause were danger. Dr. Reyes stepped close enough to shield her from the glass. "You are safe," he said. She shook her head, tears finally slipping down her face. "No," she whispered. "I am seen." And for Nurse Morgan, that was the more frightening thing. The applause stopped when Morgan opened the consultation room door, not because respect faded, but because everyone suddenly understood that she was not a symbol walking out. She was a person, a nurse with red eyes, a bruised shoulder she kept pretending did not hurt, and an old jacket folded over one arm like it was both evidence and burial cloth. The emergency department staff stood in the corridor with the awkward tenderness of people who had witnessed someone's private wound without permission. Lila wiped her cheeks. Greer looked ashamed, which was useful but late. Agent Harlan stood behind Morgan, no longer blocking anyone. His badge seemed smaller now, or maybe he did. Colonel Voss remained in the consultation room, seated, staring at the helmet. Morgan walked to Elias's bay. The curtain was half open. He was awake. Lila had kept the lights low, just as Morgan had asked. The helmet case sat nearby, open now, the old helmet resting on its cloth. Elias turned his head when Morgan entered, and his face changed with a relief so deep it made him look 14 again. "They opened it?" he asked. Morgan sat beside him. "Yes, the file. Yes, his eyes filled. Did it still have your name? She smiled through tears. Yeah. Elias let out a broken breath. I was scared it would be empty. Was I? He looked at the helmet. I kept seeing it every year. The lantern. Adults told me I invented you because I needed someone brave in the memory. Morgan touched the bed rail. You did need someone brave, she said, but you did not invent me. He gave a faint laugh that turned into a cough. She adjusted his oxygen with practiced ease. Behind her, Dr. Reyes stood near the doorway, keeping others away. He had questions, so many questions, that they crowded behind his teeth, but he did not ask them, not then. Harlan approached slowly. Dr. Reyes stiffened. Morgan noticed. It is all right. Harlan stopped at the curtain line. He looked at Elias first, then at Morgan. For once his voice had no performance in it. I was wrong. Morgan said nothing. He swallowed. I shoved you. I accused you. I treated your jacket like evidence of a lie before I knew anything. I was wrong. The apology was not beautiful. It was not enough, but it was real enough to stand in the room. Morgan studied him. Agent Harlan, she said, when a patient is in distress, your first question cannot be who owns the hallway. He nodded. Face tight. Your badge gives you responsibility, she continued, not permission to make frightened people smaller. He looked down. Yes, Mom. The mom startled him after he said it. It startled her, too. She did not forgive him in the dramatic way people expect stories to demand. Forgiveness was not a performance either. It was a long road, and some people had only taken the first step. But she said, learn from this before the next patient pays for it. He nodded again and stepped back. Rear came next, which Morgan had expected and dreaded. Nurse Morgan, he began. On behalf of Harborline Medical Center, I want to say we will fully cooperate with the Department of Defense Review. Your position here is secure. Morgan looked at him with quiet exhaustion. My position should have been secure before the Pentagon called. Rear's face reddened. Dr. Reyes looked away to hide the fierce satisfaction in his eyes. Morgan continued, I do not need a speech in the hallway. I need written policy that no outside authority can remove clinical staff from a patient without physician review. I need training for federal transfers. And I need you to apologize to the nurses who were afraid to defend me because they knew administration might not protect them. Greer opened his mouth, then closed it. You will have that? Lila smiled faintly through tears. Elias whispered, still giving orders. Morgan looked at him, still charting them properly. For the first time all day, a small laugh moved through the bay. Then Colonel Voss appeared. The laughter died. He had removed his overcoat. Without it, his uniform looked less like armor and more like weight. In his hands he held the folded photograph that had fallen from Morgan's badge. He stopped several feet away. Morgan, he said. She stood. Dr. Reyes remained nearby. Voss noticed and gave a sad nod, as if accepting that he no longer had the right to speak to her without witnesses. He sighed. Not all of it. That is not an excuse. No. His eyes filled. But he held himself still. I remembered your voice on the radio. I remembered you saying the map was wrong. I remembered telling you the rot was gone. Morgan's face was unreadable. I remembered the collapse, he continued. After that, the debriefs came. They told me memory was unreliable. They told me command needed a clean report. They told me you were gone. Then they told me the mission needed a living face, and you let them use yours. His jaw worked. Yes, the words seemed to cost him more than any denial. Morgan looked at the photograph in his hand. He held it out. I should have looked for you. She took the photo but did not soften. Ah, she said. You should have. Voss nodded. Elias watched him with a hard expression. You let them say she never existed. Voss looked at the patient. I did. Why? There were many possible answers. Fear, ambition, trauma, orders, shame. Voss chose the only one that mattered, because it was easier for me. Morgan looked down. The honesty did not repair the harm, but it stopped adding to it. Voss turned back to her. I am submitting a statement to Captain Pierce. Full correction. No conditions. Morgan searched his face. Do not do it for me, she said. He swallowed. Then for who? For the people whose names were also pushed under yours. Voss closed his eyes. Yes, she handed him the photo. Keep that copy until you write it. Look at their faces. He took it like a sentence. Then he turned to the helmet. My eye, he asked. Morgan looked at Elias. Elias nodded once. Voss stepped to the case and touched the edge of the helmet, not lifting it. His fingers trembled over the lantern. I heard the pilots call Lantern 7 after the extraction. He whispered. No answer. I thought silence meant death. Morgan's voice softened despite herself. Sometimes silence means someone ordered the radio off. Voss looked at her, pain deepening. Who ordered it? She did not answer. He understood. The old machinery of secrecy had been bigger than either of them. But that did not make them equal inside it. He had risen. She had vanished. Now Pierce's voice returned from the tablet, still connected through Greer's device. Colonel Voss, your statement request is logged. Nurse Morgan, the Records Integrity Division, will need your formal consent before public correction. Morgan looked toward the screen. Public, only if you choose it, Naomi said. You have the right to remain in protected privacy. The corridor waited again, but differently now. Earlier, they had waited to judge her. Now they waited because her choice mattered. Morgan looked at Elias, exhausted but peaceful for the first time since arrival. She looked at Lila, young and fierce, and learning what courage costs. She looked at Dr. Reyes, who had believed her before he understood her. She looked at Harlan. She looked at Voss, broken open by the truth he had avoided. Then she looked at the old jacket in her arms. For 12 years, the hidden patch had faced inward against the lining, touching only darkness. She ran her thumb over the seam. I do not want a ceremony, she said. Naomi did. Understood. I do not want cameras. Understood. I want the record corrected for everyone in that file, not just me. Naomi's expression softened. That can be done. Morgan took a breath. And I want my patch restored where it belonged. Lila stepped forward before anyone else could speak. I can sew. Morgan turned to her. Lila gave a trembling smile. My grandmother taught me. Not perfect, but strong. Morgan looked at the young nurse for a long moment. Then she handed her the old jacket. Lila accepted it like something sacred. The correction of a life did not begin with a parade. It began at the nurse's station with a needle, a spool of dark thread from the lost and found drawer, and a young nurse carefully opening the hidden seam of an old olive jacket while the emergency department moved around her. Patients still needed blankets. Phones still rang. Someone still argued about discharge papers. A child still cried until a volunteer found orange juice. The ordinary world kept turning, and that was why the extraordinary truth mattered. Nurse Morgan returned to work. Dr. Reyes tried to send her home. She refused. Your shoulder needs ice, he said. My patient needs monitoring. Your patient has 3 nurses hovering over him, because half the hospital now thinks he is guarding national treasure. Morgan glanced toward Elias's bay, where Lila had stationed herself with the seriousness of a palace guard. He did guard something, she said. Yes, Dr. Reyes replied. You, she looked down, uncomfortable. He softened his tone. Lina, she stilled at her first name. I am sorry I did not ask sooner, he said. For what? For who you were before Harborline. She gave a tired smile. Most people are allowed to have a before, not when it hurts them every day. She looked toward the ambulance bay doors. Cold air moved through whenever they opened, stirring the papers on the desk. He did not want to become a story, she said. You were already one. No, I was a nurse. That was enough. He nodded. It still is. That answer reached her. For all the talk of files and helmets and military records, the thing she feared most was being taken away from the simple identity she had built with her own hands. Nurse Morgan, the woman who knew where the extra warm blankets were kept, the woman who could calm a frightened patient by explaining every sound in the room, the woman who stayed after her shift because someone had no family. She had lost one name to secrecy. She did not want to lose another to legend. Across the corridor, Agent Harlan stood near the federal barrier, speaking quietly with his supervisor by phone. His posture had changed. The barrier tape was coming down. The security officers no longer blocked clinical staff from moving freely. Harlan saw Morgan watching and lowered his eyes. Good, she thought, not because she wanted him ashamed forever, but because shame, held honestly, could become a doorway. Colonel Voss remained in the consultation room for almost an hour writing his statement. No aides helped him. No polished language softened it. When he came out, his face looked older, but cleaner somehow, like a man who had stopped holding his breath. He handed the signed statement to Greer, who scanned it to Captain Pierce. Then Voss approached Morgan one final time. I cannot undo it, he said. No, I cannot give you back 12 years. No, I can tell the truth now. She looked at him. That is late, she said. I know, but late truth is still better than decorated silence. His eyes filled again. Do you hate me? Morgan considered the question. The younger version of her might have said yes. The version trapped under collapsed beams and bad reports might have screamed it. The protected civilian who woke from nightmares in a rented apartment might have built a life around it. But the nurse standing in the emergency corridor had spent years watching people waste their final moments on pride. No, she said. I hate what fear made you protect. Voss bowed his head. Then I will stop protecting it. She believed he meant it. She also knew meaning it was only the first inch of a long climb. Lila returned with the jacket near the end of Morgan's shift. The hidden patch was no longer hidden. It sat on the outside of the left sleeve, carefully stitched. The black circle and gold lantern, visible again after years, pressed into darkness. The fabric around it was worn. The thread was not perfectly straight, but it held. Lila looked nervous. I can redo it if you want. Morgan touched the patch. No, she whispered. It is strong. Lila's face crumpled a little. I am sorry we watched. Morgan understood which moment she meant. The shove, the silence after, the terrible pause when everyone waited for someone else to defend her. She touched Lila's hand. Next time, Morgan said, do not wait for the person being shoved to prove they are worth defending. Lila nodded through tears. I will not. Morgan put on the jacket. The corridor seemed to inhale. No applause came this time. That was good. Applause would have made it about spectacle again. Instead, people made space for her. A security guard opened a door without being asked. An intern picked up a fallen glove box and replaced it carefully on the wall. A receptionist who had doubted her earlier whispered, Nurse Morgan, with such respect that Morgan nearly had to stop walking. She went to LAS. He was sitting up slightly now, stable enough to speak without fighting for breath. The helmet rested on the table beside him. He smiled when he saw the patch. There it is, he said. Morgan looked down at the sleeve. Lila fixed it. No, he said. She put it where we could see it. Morgan sat beside him. Elias looked at the helmet. Do you want it? She did, and she did not. Some objects are too heavy because they carry proof. Some are heavier because they carry the people who never got to hold them again. It came with you, she said. It belongs to your file. She shook her head. It belongs to everyone who needed it to be found. He considered that. Then let it stay in the review until the record is corrected. Good. And after? Morgan looked at the helmet. After. For 12 years she had lived without after. She had lived shift to shift, patient to patient, winter to winter, keeping the patch hidden and the story sealed. Now after had arrived looking like a battered helmet and a federal call. After, she said. Might be it. It's hid somewhere quiet, not under glass, not under a spotlight. Somewhere people can read the name. Elias nodded. The names, he said. Yes, not just hers. That mattered. Captain Naomi Pierce called again near midnight. The emergency department had thinned into its strange late-night rhythm, quieter but never still. Morgan took the call in the same consultation room where everything had opened. Naomi appeared tired now, but her eyes were kind. I wanted to tell you before the formal notice, she said. The file correction has been initiated. Colonel Voss' statement matches recovered audio fragments from the helmet recorder. Morgan blinked. There was audio, partial, damaged, but enough. Morgan sat slowly. Naomi continued. Your voice is on it. Morgan looked toward the blinds. What did I say? Naomi hesitated. You were counting steps for a child, Elias. Morgan closed her eyes. And after that? You told someone to take your helmet. Morgan covered her mouth. Naomi's voice softened further. You said, if I do not come out, open her file. Morgan's breath broke. She had forgotten saying it. Or maybe she had buried it so deep that memory could no longer reach without help. Naomi waited. Morgan wiped her face. I thought no one heard. Someone did. The file had not opened because the Pentagon suddenly became merciful. It opened because a terrified 14-year-old boy had grown into a man who refused to let adults change the paper forever. It opened because an old helmet carried a damaged whisper. It opened because a hidden patch had survived the lining of a jacket. It opened because a nurse shoved in public still reached for the patient first. Naomi said, there will be people who want to speak with you. Reporters might eventually hear pieces. We can protect your privacy. Morgan looked at her restored patch. I want privacy, she said. But I do not want erasure, Naomi nodded. There is a difference. We will honor it, Morgan almost smiled. That would be new. Naomi accepted the criticism with grace. Then let it start now. When the call ended, Morgan sat alone for a moment. Through the glass, she could see the emergency department moving in reflections. Lila checking supplies. Dr. Reyes speaking with the family. Harlan removing the last of the federal tape. Voss standing by the exit with his statement copy in hand, waiting for transport back to whatever reckoning came next. The world had not become fair in one day, but one lie had lost its shelter. Morgan stepped into the corridor. Voss was leaving. He saw her and stopped. I heard there was audio, he said. She nodded. I am glad, he whispered. She believed that too. Then he saluted, not sharply, not ceremonially, slowly, with humility, in the middle of a hospital corridor where hours earlier he had demanded she remove her jacket. Morgan did not return it at first. She was a nurse in scrubs, a civilian by record, a woman who had spent years trying not to belong to that part of her life anymore. Then she lifted her hand. The salute was small, but everyone who saw it understood something had been restored. Voss lowered his hand and walked away. Agent Harlan watched from the far side of the desk. He did not interrupt. He did not explain himself again. He simply took down the final barrier stand, folded the yellow tape, and carried it out of the emergency room corridor. Dr. Reyes approached Morgan with an ice pack. "No argument," he said. She looked at it. "I am working. You are icing your shoulder while working. That is not medically precise. I am the doctor. Unfortunately," he smiled. She took the ice pack. For the first time all day, she let someone care for the place that hurt. Near dawn, Elias slept. The helmet case rested beside him, logged properly, guarded without being worshipped. Lila had gone home after Morgan practically ordered her to rest. Greer had sent the first draft of the new transfer policy. It was imperfect, but it existed. Harlan's supervisor had requested formal review footage. Voss's statement had reached the Records Integrity Division, and Nurse Morgan walked the corridor in her old olive jacket, with the patch visible. Some people stared. She let them. At the ambulance bay doors, cold air slipped in again. She stood there for a moment, breathing it, feeling the weight of the jacket on her shoulders. For years, that weight had meant secrecy. Now it meant something else. Not pride exactly, not peace yet. Might be permission. Permission to have been brave and broken. Permission to be ordinary and extraordinary. Permission to keep being Nurse Morgan without burying Elana. Grace Morgan beneath the lining. Dr. Reyes found her there. "You okay?" She looked at the waking sky beyond the ambulance bay windows. "No," she said honestly. He nodded. Then she added, "But I think I might be." That was enough. Behind them, Elias stirred and whispered in his sleep. Not with fear this time, but with recognition. Lantern. Morgan turned back toward the patients, the monitors, the ringing phones, the living work still waiting for her hands. The Pentagon had opened her file, but Harborline Medical Center had opened something too. Its eyes. And this time, when Nurse Morgan walked down the emergency room corridor, everyone watched for a different reason. They watched the old jacket. They watched the restored patch. They watched the woman they had underestimated step back into the work she had never stopped doing. No one blocked her. No one told her she did not belong. And when she reached Elias's bedside, she placed one steady hand on the rail, looked at the helmet that had carried her name through years of silence, and whispered the words she had once needed someone to say for her. "You are not erased anymore." Some stories do not end with medals, cameras, or speeches. Some end with an old jacket stitched open, a helmet returned from silence, and a nurse finally seen by the people who once looked away. If this story touched you, subscribe to Hidden Patch Stories, and remember this: truth might arrive late, but when it does, even the proudest room must go quiet.